You're not in a closet this time.
No, I'm not in the closet this time. I have my office available to me.
No, just the constant. Just reach over. We've got Chex
Yeah,
Mix over
totally.
here.
Cracking pistachios and stuff. Yeah.
Welcome, fanatics. This is the latest entry in the Diary of Doom. I'm Dylan, and join me as we look back on the rich history of doom metal and its sister sounds based on the recounted tales of its followers. Every week, we'll have a different guest to spin their yarn. You can visit the website at diaryofdoom.com, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, follow the podcast on diaryofdoom.podbean.com, and subscribe and listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you have a question, want to pitch something or whatever, you can fire off an email to diaryofdoom1968@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon that you can support for additional episodes and whatnot. By the time this episode comes out, the first episode of the sidecast movies from Green Hell will be out. Talk about the movie Freaked in the debut episode. So you can find that and more over at the Patreon. That's at patreon.com/diary of doom. Joining us for this week's chapter is a returning guest, Jon Weisnewski of Sandrider, but also kicking off a solo project called Nuclear Dudes, which might be not make any sense. Is there only one dude in Nuclear Dudes?
Yes, just me. It's a tip of the hat to Thrones, who was a awesome, amazing one-person band that was running out of the Northwest for a long time. I think still is technically, but he would always start his shows with "We Are the Thrones." Yeah,
Thrones being Joe Preston.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like he's around. I don't know. I haven't not seen him in and around my neck of the woods.
He did a Seattle show, I think with Sumac or something like that, right before lockdown happened. So I know he hadn't like stopped playing or anything like that. So pretty sure he's still around. But yeah, that's absolutely. So like I've had the band name Nuclear Dudes in my back pocket for a long time. Like I've always wanted to use that for some project. And then I started doing this one. And I just felt like it was just a good, fun, like silly name for sort of the vibe of this project. And yeah, it was a good, like, Thrones has already done that, sort of having a plural band name for a solo artist.
So. I thought it was like the Lone Rangers, like in Airheads.
Yeah, so good.
If it's not like clear, Nuclear Dudes is literally not doom metal. It's like slamming death metal with synths, and it's pretty rad. And Jon does everything in it.
Thank you. Yeah.
As I mentioned, Jon was on a previous episode where we showcased a few of the Satanic Royalty bands after that label launch. And as I said in the preamble, I just didn't give Jon's original band Akimbo the time of day during the discussion. So I spent some time with the band, checking it out. And, I'm sure at this point, like you've talked about it a lot, but, I felt like kind of obligated to have an episode about it, or at least a little bit more about it, like now before we get into Nuclear Dudes. And so, like, I guess my first question is, being someone who grew up in New Jersey, why on earth would a band from Seattle write an album about sharks in New Jersey?
That's a great question. I've always had an obsession with sharks ever since I was a kid. It's like, how every kid gets like obsessed with like dinosaurs or robots or fire trucks or something. And it just never went away for me. And I've always had this like fascination / fear / like conservationist appreciation for the sort of the creatures that they are. I always wanted to do a concept album, sort of like a bucket list item for me. And then I was feeling the itch to do like, hey, we should do a concept record. Let's do like a heavy, dark concept album. And I read right around this time, I read this book called 12 Days of Terror, which is about a series of shark attacks that happened on the Jersey coast around the time of World War One. It was like 1914 or 1915 or so. And this book just blew my mind. And it is the true story that inspired
Jaws, right?
Yeah,
Or,
Jaws.
Yeah.
The author to write Jaws, which then became the movie. It's a really fascinating story of like some insanely brutal shark attacks that happened in public areas. It occurred during a time where like marine biology wasn't a thing. Like what we knew about fish in the ocean at that time was all informed by sailors and fishermen, right? So it's
probably delivered with like just glorious vocabulary.
Yeah. So it's just a really fascinating story about how this small town sort of like dealt with this string of like very bizarre and abnormal shark attacks that happened. There's a bunch of really interesting theories about why, and there's a whole bunch of really great there's a bunch of great storytelling about sort of like the events as they went down. And there's obviously no eyewitnesses now, but they paint as close of like of a story picture for you as possible. And it was just a phenomenal book, and it was like seemed like a good candidate for to write a concept record around that tied in with something that I've been interested in my whole life. And so like I wanted to give the album title like something that was sort of like not presumptuous, right? Like I didn't want it to be like sharks are gonna fuck you up the album, right? I was just like figured we call it something sort of like mild that doesn't really hint at sort of like the subject matter all that much. I felt like that was a good analogy to sort of the fear and anticipation of something like a shark being just under the water where you can't see it, but you kind of know it's there. And so yeah, I was like, we'll just call it Jersey Shores because that has no association with anything. And literally the year that came out, the fucking TV show launched.
Yes, the very mild Jersey Shore, New Jersey, renowned for its mild, calm, demeanored people.
Right. And so
it's mostly yelling.
So that was sort of like we would have to explain that one a lot, like when that album first came out. Like, why is it called Jersey Shores? Does it have anything to do with that show? It's like, no, nothing to do with the show.
That's amazing.
But that's why.
I mean, it does
tattoo of the river right here where it happened.
Is it Matawan?
Yep, that's the river right there.
That's the one. Yeah, I mean, like I know of that lore, so by growing up in New Jersey and obviously like watching Jaws and fucking Shark Week and shit like that. Given like what kind of band Akimbo is, where it's hard to really pin you into like a very specific sound, because I mean you're doing all kinds of shit in that band. It's fast, it's aggressive, it's melodic, it's conceptual, it's esoteric. I mean, Forging Steel and Laying Stone in contrast to Jersey Shores is just such an interesting like contrast, because that one just feels very like weird and sci-fi and strange and sort of like in a weird way like embodying a lot of classical metal aspects, and yet it doesn't feel that way at all, so yeah, it's remarkable like what you did in 5 albums.
Thank you. I mean, we just like, I want to say that we tried not to overthink it too much and just sort of write what feels good. So the backbone of that band was me and the drummer Nat, who's in Sandrider, was on the show previously with me, and we've been best friends since high school and played music together since high school. And when he and I play and write music together, it's very it's like impulsive, I think is a good way to put it, right? Like we kind of like throw ideas around until something just kind of clicks and all the energy is there, and you don't have to like try and like break down a part and be like, no. So on the 3, you don't want to hit the kick, you want to do the snare on the 3, and I'm going to do this little transition. Like we try to avoid that altogether. And we always really look for that, like those practices where you're like, I have this riff, I'm just going to play it for you guys, and then you play it, and then the drums are like immediately on it, and it's just like it just takes off, right? And that's always been sort of like what we've listened for in our practices. I think I'm better about it now. I used to be not as good about it, but I'm better at recognizing when a song like that sort of like appears, and then I'm better at recognizing when we're having too much trouble sort of like figuring out a vibe to a song and like an emotion behind a song, to just scrap it, just walk with that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to force it. It's fine. We'll find another one. That probably plays into a lot of sort of that scattered feeling of akimbo stuff. Is we're just like, a lot of those songs are just like in the moment when we were writing them, they just clicked. Something about it just like worked. We're like, okay, we'll do that.
You know, it's not like you didn't have an impressive run or anything like that, but kind of to, you know, go hand in hand with your own podcast, Tomorrow We Die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's got to be tough for a band like Akimbo, which is like not easy to like really, you know, get into a specific genre and like, you know, be a very active touring band. And I mean, I'm sure you get into that a lot in your own podcast and the trials and tribulations to go through, but it's like, you know, the grit shows because a lot of people really just like fucking love that band. And it's also interesting to me that you there wasn't really a dramatic ending. You're just like, all right, that kind of, it's done. That was it, you know? And people are almost like, what?
Yeah, it was, did not come to a bloody climax or anything. It was, so, I mean, it basically was like, we lost too many guitar players, and it just sort of like wore us out. So that the common theme with that band was just, it was a constant search for a guitar player who was able to tour in the way that Nat and I wanted to tour. We just had a really tough time keeping a guitar player around who's sort of like dedicated in that way. It was after Jersey Shores came out. We had a rough year, really rough tour on Jersey Shores. And I was pretty emotionally spent at the time. So I was like, I think I just need a break, and maybe we should tour less because I'm getting tired. And this was also around the time that Sandrider was starting to, and Sandrider, the reason I wanted to start Sandrider was almost like a complete rejection of the work ethic that Akimbo had built up, where we were just going so hard and so fast. We never took time to just take it easy, rest. And it was starting to burn me out pretty hard. And so I started Sandrider because I've been playing bass in Akimbo, and I wanted to just try playing guitar again in a band. And I also just wanted to not have any expectations. I just wanted to have a band to just play and just feel the joy of making music with your buddies, and not feel like, oh, we have to practice twice a week because we got a show coming up, or like we want to hit the studio soon, so we got to make sure these things are really tight. And then once the studio record is done, we're gonna hit the road. So keep going. Like I needed to like connect with the art again, and sort of like just feel the good vibes of playing loud music with your buddies just for the joy of it. So that was sort of why Sandrider got started. And then, you know, Akimbo was like just kind of wrecking me. And then our guitar player quit, and it was kind of like a chat with Nat and I. We're like, well, what do we do? Like, I'm feeling pretty burnt out. We've got Sandrider, and it's fun and awesome and easy. And I really don't want to try looking for another guitar player again and go through the whole thing of like putting the word out, meeting up with people, practicing with them, feeling out the vibe, teaching them a set, going on a tour, still feeling it out. Like, we just didn't want to do it again. We're like, this seems like a good, you know, seems like the world is giving us a signal right now. You know, guitar player's out, got a new thing going. Let's just call it a day. And we had a whole album written. So we were like, well, let's record our album. And to, you know, sort of like punctuate the band. So we recorded the last album when we already knew that we were breaking up. We knew we weren't going to tour on it. We're just going to release it and walk away. So
just like kind of done deal, on to the next thing.
Yeah. So it was very anticlimactic. It was just sort of like, we're just kind of exhausted, and we're just like, we're just going to rest now. I'm just going to sit here and take a break.
But that trajectory from Akimbo to Sandrider, now onto blast beat synth madness with
Yeah.
Nuclear Dudes. It's wild, but like I guess it does track for someone like you because you're into like a lot of different kind of music. And then when it comes to that, like I don't imagine you were ever content to stick with one style, and you're very into like wanting to experiment, and sort of like now is no time like the present, right?
Yeah. I think I've always been my whole life I've been a huge fan of extreme metal, more so than Nat or most of my bandmates that I end up playing with. I had a power violence band for a little bit that never went outside of Seattle. We did one release on a cassette, but yeah, I never had an avenue to sort of like creatively like get into some of my like extreme metal fandom. That's what Nuclear Dudes is for me. It's kind of funny. Like the original reason I started that project was because COVID was driving me crazy. I didn't have any like outlet or way to sort of like get creative. Like I've been going to band practice every week for my entire life since I've been like a teenager, right? And I've been playing at least one show a month for literally my entire life, like at least one a month, right? And just to have it all stop was just really brutal for me, and I needed some sort of outlet. So figured out how to do a little bit of home recording, and it was mostly just to keep Sandrider going because we were halfway done with an album. We wanted to keep writing, and so we were like passing riff ideas around to each other on the computers. And then I was just like, I just need some sort of like creative focus to help keep my mind out of like all the awful that I'm feeling and that's sort of like happening in the world. This is like as Trump's presidency is like coming to a horrific end, So it's just, like,
Yeah.
you're stuck in the house and you're like wondering if like like what's going to happen with Black Lives Matter protests, and it's just like it was just an awful time. And so I just gave myself this project, and I was just like, I'm going to write one song a week. I'm going to write like a brutal like 60-second power violence death metal disgusting fast song, and if I just do this once a week, then I'll have this awesome catalog of like crazy style, like Pig Destroyer ish blast metal. So that was what I originally started the project doing. And then I very quickly realized that my hands can't play what I want to hear. Like I'm
I
just
can't
not.
shred that fast, man.
Yeah, man. I come from punk, right? Like all of my guitar playing and bass playing has all come from like it's like punk and rock influence more. I just don't have the years and years of like palm muting and like technical, shit. I just can't do it, man. And so I realized like, all right, okay, so I can't make like Pig Destroyer style stuff. Like there's got to be something else I can do to sort of like fill in some of the blanks here. And that's when I started playing around with synths. And then it clicked. I think the first song of the first album, Bad at Sleep, when I wrote that song, I was like, aha, I have a thing here that feels good. It feels like it's like totally my creative wheelhouse. And my other very, very, very long time musical passion, in addition to extreme metal, is like synth pioneer bands. Like I've always loved Kraftwerk, Devo, Gary Numan, Two Way Army, and all that stuff. Like early stuff, like Philip Glass. I've always loved that shit so much. And so sort of like, I'll be honest, I was afraid to go synths because I was like, man, it's just gonna be a Genghis Tron ripoff, and I don't want to be a Genghis Tron ripoff.
It did make me think of Genghis Tron.
Yeah, and it totally like I think I feel very confident in what it is now, because like I was really scared to like just like peek under the synth and be like, man, I just don't want to end up being some sort of like derivative Genghis Tron bullshit. But I feel like I went hard on Gary Numan because Gary Newman's I'm a huge fan of his early stuff.
Gary Numan rules. I saw him once.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. You see him currently?
No, like he just rode through town. No, but when I saw him, he did 2 different sets. So the first set was all of like Cars and all that classic shit, and then the second half was all of his like 9 Inch Nails sort of industrial.
Gary Numan.
Yes, Scary Numan. That's that's good. Scary Numan. Yeah, and it was awesome. Like it was so rad. One of the best shows I've seen, I think.
Yeah, no, he's a phenomenal songwriter, and so I think like that's kind of just the story I told myself. It's just like you're just showing your love for Gary Numan, so it's okay to have these synths in there. And I think I think it's different enough from Genghis Tron that it sits apart personally. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, you can hear the similarities, but like,
Mhm.
I think like just the way that the synthesizer has like really come into the forefront of music, you know. I just listened to the new Carpenter Brew album and like how that like is so fucking in, and like people just
Mhm.
love that 80s sort of
Oh yeah,
vibe and what
so
and
good.
everything. So, and I do too, you know. I like a lot of that shit. But I do think
Yeah,
this death metal synth seems to be a good match, you know.
yeah.
And another thing I was thinking was like you can kind of benefit. I don't know if this is something you would like take on the road or do live, but like you could benefit from having a cool live or backing band that doesn't kind of exist in that space traditionally. So like I'm
Mhm.
assuming you're relying on a drum machine for this,
Yeah, no, it's.
unless you're banging it out.
I wish. God, I wish. Yeah, my brain understands drums. My body can't follow through. I played drums a long time ago in a hardcore band, but yeah, I can't like the drums that are programmed in there are pretty technical. But
You'd have to rent the guy from Meshuggah to play.
yeah, that new album's sick, by the way. It just came out.
I haven't
Super
checked it
good.
out yet.
Oh, super good. Um, yeah, in terms of doing it live, I would love to be able to, but I think there are a couple huge factors in there that would prevent me from doing it. One being like there's a ton of work I'd have to do to just like so I don't I don't know if I could find people who would learn the
Mm-hmm.
songs and play them live. So I think it'd have to be some sort of combination of live musicians and or just separating tracks and giving them to a sound guy for him to just or him or her to just mix through the PA, right? But then that leaves me in a very awkward position where I'm just one guy with a microphone on stage and like maybe in my 20s I could have fronted a one man grind project, but I don't know, dude. If I have the energy or stage presence to be entertaining, just wiggling around while music is playing over PA speakers, you know. So
You're just doing the vocals. That's
live,
what I'm
yeah,
imagining.
yeah, live for sure. Yeah, no, I mean it was totally a home recording project. So like even some
Mm-hmm.
of those guitar parts are like very careful playing stuff I couldn't really pull off live, or if I tried to, I would have to practice a lot.
You don't have like that. You don't have like that gnarled hand that I imagine every death metal like player like is now because they've just been doing this for so long.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't have that.
You know, another thing I thought of when I was listening to it was it reminded me of Devin Townsend, who's a familiar face here. I think I've mentioned that. Devin Townsend was like a pretty big band or like artist for me in college, and like his music is so fucking weird and everything. But like even by the end of Strapping Young Lad, you could kind of hear like that more bizarre influence in there, and that kind of reminded me of that. So like it's cool to hear that sort of that extreme music like getting in there because Strapping Young Lad is one of the heaviest fucking things I've ever heard, and it's not slow, it's very fast and very big.
Yeah, yeah. I'm honored by the comparison. That's great.
So is there like plans to put it out as like are you gonna do like a vinyl or a cassette or any like kind of like merch tie-in or what have you?
I would love to. I don't like. I need someone to help me do that.
Well, what we gotta brainstorm an idea. Nuclear Dudes. It's like it's a
Okay.
great name. It's a what could you do? What do you imagine Nuclear Dudes looks like?
Oh, like what for like merch or just like a physical release?
Oh no. I was just like saying like what would like in your head like what does a nuclear dude look like on a t-shirt?
Oh. You know, a buddy of mine, TJ, who is King Dude. I'm not sure if you're familiar with King Dude.
I am familiar with King
Yeah,
Dude.
so he grew up in Seattle. Like we grew up, playing music in bands
Mm-hmm.
together. Like not in the same band together, but we were just buddies early on. And he did an art show in Seattle. Like I don't even remember what year, but it was really good. It was like paintings of these like cartoony paintings of like zombies and like half decayed people who were all like in thrash bands or like metal bands or like on skateboards and stuff. And so I think something kind of like that, like like weird, like zombified creatures who are like playing flying V's or, or like shredding in a pool or something like that, in an empty pool. I think that imagery like that comes to mind. I think a lot of like 80s sci-fi horror stuff is sort of like what I picture this music going well with. And then also like the album art for the record is like this creature that my son drew. He's 6 years old. And around Halloween, he just started drawing monsters, and they're so cool. And I know every parent says, like, oh, my kid's drawings are so cool. But they really are. Like, they're very, like, bizarre, sort of like stick figure creatures with interesting details on them and, like, really weird, creepy proportions, like long, stretchy fingers and, like, a really weird shaped head. When he did those, my wife and I loved them so much that we just sort of like set the drawings aside, and I was like writing Nuclear Dude stuff, and they were like, the drawings were like in a place in the kitchen where they're like always in eyesight, right? And so I would always just like look at them, and I'd have these songs going through my head, and so they kind of became like these little creatures kind of became synonymous with the project. And so yeah, right now my plan is to have one of those guys on every record, album, release,
Nice.
Whatever. Yeah, I got a bunch. I got like 14 albums I can make out of those dudes.
Yeah, and like you don't even have to pay them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You just gotta give them. You gotta feed them and give them housing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll pay you in pasta with butter and salt. There you go.
He might have to he might try to renegotiate at some point for something a little more like, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, he's gonna be like, I would like to go to bed 30 minutes later. It's like, that's a tough deal, dude.
Yeah, I don't know, buddy. He doesn't have much to demand because it's not those albums are going to actually make a profit or anything.
So I don't know like how many. I'm sure people know, but like you also work in the video game industry, and like I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about and like what you've done. I don't know anybody who works in the video game industry. I think the video game industry is fucking very weird from kind of like, I've played video games my entire fucking life.
Nice.
But I'm not like a hardcore gamer like some people I am friends with, or just people that I watch on like YouTube or anything like that. Like it's not my life, but I've always enjoyed them. Is there any similarity to working in the video game industry as there is like being in a band and being in a music scene? Is there any similarity to it?
Probably yes. I think so. I think it depends a lot on your discipline and sort of like what you do in the games industry. I'm a designer, so I am luckily involved with a lot of like creative stuff, creative decision making, and I would say in that regard, it is extremely similar to being in a band. So you think about, if you're in a band, you are a group of people creatively coming together to try and make some sort of cohesive experiment. There's little bits of each person represented in the music that comes out, but each person is sort of like doing their thing in collaboration with each other to make like a song or an album. And so in principle, it's super similar to working in games, where you have animators, artists, designers, engineers, like all these different creative disciplines that have to come together. Each person sort of like exercises their own creative output through their discipline. And at the end of the day, it gets, packaged together and, is a thing for people to consume. And so the way it gets similar is sort of like how you can effectively communicate with your band, aka your development team. And it's just like, it'll vary from person to person, but I think I was inherently a little bit better at sort of the emotional like empathy that comes with needing to be a collaborator, where you have to ride this line where you have to advocate for sort of your creative desires and things that you care about, and also give room for other people to do their thing. And sometimes that means, like bringing it back to a band analogy, and sometimes that means, if I wrote a song and I thought it was going to be in like I thought it was going to be like a gallopy sort of like riff. And then the drummer hears it and he's like, no, man, we're slowing this down. I'm going halftime. Boom, boom, pop, boom. Then it's like, it's not what I intended, but what he's doing is not necessarily bad. So I could just like change the way I'm strumming a little bit and sort of like work with what he's doing. That kind of stuff happens in game development all the time. And so you need to be creatively resilient and ready to walk away from your ideas to collaborate with people. Yeah, so there are some similarities for sure.
Is it as given some of the stories you've told on Tomorrow We Die and some of the stories that have been told on there? And just sort of like my peripheral knowledge of like the deeper video game world, like is it as strange as I perceive it to be? Because like I did used to read like all the old gaming magazines and like but it never really made much of a blip on bigger radar until like I don't know, King of Kong was a thing. It's a great doc, by the way. Such a good documentary.
That's great. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And fuck that guy.
I know. Billy Mitchell. Fuck you, Billy Mitchell. I guess I don't know what you mean by strange. Like, is it strange? It's like the only career I know. So
I guess to rephrase it is like, how does one find themselves getting into the video game industry? It doesn't seem like something that a lot of people just sort of like, I guess you have to like be really like, that's what I want to do.
That's how it worked for me. I'm in Seattle and the Nintendo of America office is over here in Redmond, which is a suburb right outside Seattle. And when I was 18, I heard a rumor that you could get a job testing games for Nintendo. And once I heard that was true, that was my focus. I was like, that I'm going to do that. That's what I want to do. So, that's how I got into it basically was.
Wow, that's
as soon as I realized it was a thing, I just ran at it. It's hard to like, I want to test.
That just seems like a complete and total fantasy.
It's definitely not what most people think it was. So I don't know what it's like to test at Nintendo now, but when I was there, this is over 20 years ago.
Oh man, that's
you get hired.
So weird and interesting now.
You get hired as a contract tester. So you're on contract, right? You don't interview with Nintendo. You interview with an agency that they just bring in massive amounts of people with. So you have to get hired by a contracting agency. They have an interview and a questionnaire that I did, which is basically an idiot test. It's just like very, very simple, easy, straightforward questions that you write down answers to. It's just trying to figure out like, are you capable of like basic reading and writing and like, do you have any sort of like analytical mindset at all when it comes to
can you tell left from right?
Right. Yeah. So you do that, and then so I got in on my first contract. The very first thing they do is all the people on their first day, they go into a conference room and you get this long lecture by one of the full-time leads there about how important the job is and how they don't tolerate any slacking, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing to keep in mind too, this doesn't excuse any of the bad behavior that was in the games industry at the time in terms of like crunch and work culture and expectations. But something to keep in mind is that nowadays, when you release a game, you can patch it. Even if it's not a live services game, it's connected to the internet somehow. And so you can continue to support your game after a certain amount of time for as long as there are players playing. In 98, and for a long time after that, when your game was done, it was done. And that was what your game would be forever.
So that explains why I played some really bad games over the years.
A lot of the toxic behaviors that I think were common in the industry, and still are common in the industry, unnecessarily so, I don't think are excused by that, but I think it's helpful context when you're thinking about like, the fate of a whole company could be on the success and the reception of a game. And so everyone kind of needed to make sure that they treated that really, really importantly, gave it a lot of weight because, super important for a studio to be able to go on to have successful games. So there's some of the context there. So like we're at Nintendo, they're just lecturing us. You can tell right away that like, oh, this is not a fun job. Like this is serious business, and like these people are not going to be flexible. So I could tell day one, I was like, okay, just keep my head down. and I just want to try and kick ass at this. Like, I just want to silently kick ass at this. So I went as hard as I could. And like when I first started, everything's all on databases now. Like when you log a bug, it's all in the database now. But back then, you literally had to write it down on a sheet of paper. Like they had a template, a blank template piece of paper. So if you found what you thought was a problem in the game, you had to write it up in like painstaking detail with a pen and paper. At all times you were testing, you had a videotape taping the TV and the console. And so when you found what you believed to be a bug, you needed to note the timestamp on the VCR as like, this is what the lead should watch when they read this bug, go back to this video. And then basically at the end of the day, you'd hand in all your bug papers and you'd hand in your videotapes. And it was some poor bastard's job to go in and like digitize all those videos and
oh my God.
Re-enter the paper bugs into their database, probably because they didn't trust contractors with access to a computer is probably why. And yeah, man, people get fired all the time for just like little things because you're a contract workforce, right?
Yeah.
They just like, if you're slacking, if you're perceived to be slacking, they just like get rid of you and bring in someone else. So yeah, I don't know. I worked super hard. Contract was over and I had to keep looking for work in the games industry. It took a while before I finally got a good spot.
That's crazy that they had to do like all of that like manual entry. And oh man, I would love to have one of those tickets. That would be so cool to have.
Yeah.
You have one?
No. You have to hand it all into your lead, man.
Oh man.
And they were like, oh, and they're so hardcore about because you're working on games that aren't out yet, right?
Right.
So no one's allowed to have cell phones out while you're there. All like the Nintendo consoles are literally under lock and key. So you go to work.
Oh my God.
And you have to sit at your desk and wait for a lead to come around with a key, unlock a big metal box above your desk, open it, put in the ROM for the whatever game you're testing, close it, lock it, and walk away. And then they do.
It's like buying alcohol in Boston.
Yeah, totally. And then they would do this shit too, where no one on the team is allowed to leave until they take inventory of all the ROMs that went out to all the desks. It'd be regular where like you're leaving for the day and you just see some other poor teams working on some game is just like stuck there, and their lead is like yelling and accosting them because one of the ROMs is missing, and they default to blaming the contractors when always inevitably it's just one of the whoever took the ROMs like misplaced one, right? Or like they screwed up. But you just have to sit there and wait for them to like scream at you and like check people's backpacks and shit like that to try and get their ROM back.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was wild. I hope they don't do that anymore because it was bad.
It's just like for the fact that you're making something that's supposed to be fun and entertaining, it just sounds so grueling. And I guess that's kind of like being in a band. Like it's a lot of fucking work, but in the end, it's gonna be worth it.
And the people who stick through it are the ones who truly love it, for better or for worse.
So I guess obviously the next question is, how's Elden Ring going?
Oh my God, so good. It's so fucking good. I'm a dad, so I don't get to play as much as I want. But yeah, I'm like, I think I'm like level 60 now. I just beat General Radon. Was that his name?
Yeah.
The big general on a little horse.
So I'm not playing it, but my girlfriend is playing it. And I believe, hang on, I'll ask her. I think she beat Radon. Did you beat Radon? Radom?
And Radon. I think that was his name. I don't know. You're not really looking at their names when you're like trying to survive in those big
I don't know. I'm like a fake fan. I'm just a poser. But you know, I was very entertained when I saw you talking about like just the uploading of it, and I'm like, I knew this was going to be a fucking nightmare for everybody. So yes, she defeated him. But I'm considering picking it up at some point. It seems cool. It's like it's pretty metal.
Oh, it's extremely metal. I've been a fan of that studio's games for a very long time. So I've followed all their games.
It's the other Miyazaki.
Yeah.
They have such a weird visual style.
I mean, they're like a masterclass at game design, I think. Quite masterful with how everything works together and how the game is difficult. It is designed to be difficult because it pushes you harder as a player. And growth and accomplishments in that game are not because you grind it out and killed 400 goblins and got 800 gold pieces to buy the chain armor and the silver sword, and now you can defeat the ogres in the swamp. It's because mechanically the game forces you to play in a way where you actually improve as a player. And so there are systems in place kind of like that where you will level up, parts about your character will get stronger over time, but truly it's because you get better as a player, because the game is so demanding, so that like you have these boss fights that just fucking test you. They test your skills, they test your patience, they test your like how calm you can remain under like a stressful situation. Because
yes, I've heard a lot of
the second you start button mashing and like losing your patience is when the game just fucking kicks your ass. And you're just like, no, you have to stay calm and focused and like really pay attention. And then when you finally overcome one of these challenging moments, it's a feeling like none other. Like you just no games that do that for you. It's just like, and it's not because, sometimes it's because you got lucky, but usually it's because you did it. Like you figured out the right sequence of attacks, how to dodge them, how to counter attack. You did it over and over and over again until you finally accomplish the thing, and it's just such a tremendous feeling. And so everything in the game is this whole like series of systems that all lead into this sort of like pace, this really slow, hard pace of like you're gonna face a lot of challenges, but if you just stay calm, observe what's around you, slowly improve over time, you're going to overcome something that felt like you couldn't achieve it when you originally came up against it, which is kind of an analogy for life.
I was going to say, it's like another analogy for being in a band. And at some point, you're just going to be like, hey, we can do that, and it's not a problem.
Yeah. So those FromSoft games are masterful. And I would say that Elden Ring is their best one yet. So highly recommend.
Nice. I will. I mean, I was pretty hard into Skyrim, and that game was broken, and I was not allowed to finish it, as I've said a couple times before. So this game seems to actually work. Yeah. For the most part. Like I said earlier in the episode, I was peeping the Red Fang episodes today, and I got to the part where you were very high at Dale Crover's house and talking to Dale Crover. And, at the risk of embarrassing you further, and since it is 420 month, do you have any other good weed stories? You have noted that you are bad at being stoned, which I was just remarking that to my girlfriend, and she said, you're pretty good at being stoned. I'm like, yeah, but like when they're talking about this level of stoned, like that's not a good level of stoned. That's bad. That's when like your brain just starts going like zzz.
Yeah, I think I do have. So I have one good weed story from tour. Dylan, I've been saving this one for my show, but I'm going to say it on your show first. I'll still say it on my show, but
oh man, you heard it first here.
Yeah. So I do have a weed related tour story. So keep in mind that like this is years before I got stoned with Dale Crover and couldn't speak. This is back when I kind of just didn't fuck with weed at all because it kicks my ass. And then being in a scrappy touring band with a cheap van that looks like shit and everyone's hairy and filthy and scruffy, you're a magnet for cops to get pulled over. You're driving through, you may be playing Chicago, but you're driving through some podunk shit to get there, right? Where they're not necessarily going to be super kind to your van when you drive through town. And they also have all these speed traps on these little roads, these little highways too, where like it'll be like speed limit will be like 60 and then you'll get in with some city limits, right? And then there'll be one speed limit sign that says, oh, now it's 25, motherfucker. And if you miss that sign, or if you're just like, I can go 45, it's fine, then cops will pull you over and give you a hard time. So
plus you're like probably trying to get to the fucking venue.
Right. Well, and also like when you when you spend hours driving 70 miles an hour, like you get used to things going 70 miles an hour. So slowing down to 25 feels like you're basically stopped. It's like, it's really hard for your brain to handle that change in speed. Anyway, so this is all context for before the story. So we know that we're likely to get fucked with. We have been many times. So we just kind of have a band rule that's no drugs in the van at all. Straight up rule. Like we're not anti-drugs at all. Like if we're at a show or a party and people want to get fucked up, go right ahead. But the second we step into the van, we don't want anything in there because we're likely to get fucked with by cops, and whoever is driving is legally liable. And it sure would suck if somebody felt like, oh, it'd be nice to have a little weed on me in the van, and then, you know, me or Nat or somebody goes to jail because of that. So like nobody wants this. So we have this rule, no drugs in the van. We are driving through Montana on our way to Minneapolis, I believe. That's very far away, but we're just doing this crazy suicide drive from the Northwest all the way to Minneapolis to start the tour. This was, I think we had the most people in our van than we've ever had on a tour before. So we had 2 roadies and me and Nat and a guitar player, a guy whose name was Stacy, who was just a sub guitar player because our other guitar player couldn't go on this tour. And our 2 roadies, one of them is this guy Yanni, who's been with us on a bunch of tours, and one of them is this guy Blair, who I worked with at a bar and just wanted to go on tour. And I was like, hey, you want a roadie? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. So he just came with us. So we have this
easy sell.
Yeah. And so our sub guitar player Stacy is driving the van. We're hungry. We see a sign says Subway. We're in the middle of Montana, like shitty towns everywhere. You know, freeway signs is like food this way. We see Subway. He's vegetarian. Subway is one of those places you can depend on to get vegetarian food. It's hard to find vegetarian food on tour that isn't going to like make you sick, right?
Right.
So he sees a sign. It's like, Subway, I'm starving. Let's go to Subway. So we pull off the freeway. We need gas. So we stop at the gas station, get gas. And then we drive over to the Subway, and the Subway's closed. And he's like, fuck. So he just like pulls a U-turn in the Subway parking lot, gets back on the freeway, and we go. 3-4 minutes later, we got the lights flashing. He pulls over. He gets asked to step out of the van and go behind it. So we're all sitting in the van. Stacy's been pulled behind the van. We don't know what's happening. So he told us later that the cops have been watching us for miles. He said that the cops saw us try to shake them off their tail back in town. So, and we actually didn't think anything
just
of
a rogue band of thieves.
Right. We didn't think anything of it, but when we were getting gas at the gas station, a state trooper pulled up next to us and got gas. And I remember he followed. I can't remember who went in to pay because we paid cash for the gas. He followed whoever went in to pay cash. And I remember afterwards thinking, like, that's really weird. I've never in my life seen a cop or a state trooper just get gas at a public gas station. So it's like, okay, they were following us. They saw us pull up. He pulled up next to us, followed us in, just trying to stay within earshot, right? But so they thought we were hip to them following us, and that we were trying to like lose them when we pulled this U-turn in the Subway parking lot. And so I guess at this moment they're like, okay, we need more, like send all the buddies, send the boys. And so we had this like train of like 7 cop cars behind our van. And here's the other thing about our fucking van. It's like an 89 Ford Econoline or something like that. It had no air conditioning. So this thing would get brutally hot in the summer. Like you'd roll all the windows down and it'd just be like hot air blowing on your face, just melting.
So you're sitting on asphalt.
Hot. It's so freaking hot in there. So Nat had this idea. He's like, hey, maybe we can put some sort of treatment on the windows to like bounce some of the heat out. So we got this like cardboard and we put aluminum foil all on one side. So we had this like reflective aluminum foil all down our van, which basically made us look like a traveling meth lab.
yeah, exactly. Or you're like, or really paranoid about the government.
Right. So we look like a meth lab. The cops think we're trying to shake them, and they show up. They do the whole speech to Stacy about like, just tell us we know you have drugs. Just tell us who has them and where they are, and this will all go really smooth. And he's like, we don't have drugs. None of us have drugs. I promise you we don't have drugs. Because we had given, Stacy was a sub guitar player. We had given him the lecture prior. It was like, dude, no drugs in the band. Big deal. He's like, not going to be a problem. We're like, seriously, no fucking drugs in the band. So he is ultra confident that there's no drugs in the band. And so, but the cops keep going, and they bring the dogs, and the dogs come sniff all around the van and shit. And it's just this big, long thing. Like, he gets threatened to get taken to jail. They open up the van door. The dog comes in, is like sniffing around everyone's backpacks. And the dog doesn't sniff anything. They can't find anything. And so they have to let us go, right? So they very reluctantly let us go. We're driving again. And Stacy was like super paranoid and like freaked out. And he's like, I'm not turning on this van until they all leave. So we waited there like an extra 20 minutes for all the cops to just like turn around and go back to their town they're from. Finally start heading down the road. We're driving. And suddenly our van smells like weed. And I was just like, that's so funny. Like, our van smells like pot. After all that crazy, like, I wonder what that is. And then Yanni, our roadie, he says, can we pull the van over? I think I'm going to throw up. So we pull over. He goes out and he starts vomiting into the grass because Yanni had a couple joints that he had snuck on tour, and he knew that they were not allowed, but he's like, I want to have some joints on this tour. And when we got pulled over, he ate them. Because he was so freaked out. So he just crammed them in his mouth and ate them. And he had this, the whole time, he had this horrific burp sitting in his stomach, and he just held it in. And then everything's safe, and we get going, and he burps up this like weed fume. And then he was getting so sick that he had to get out and barf. But yeah, so that's my other weed story from tour.
That is amazing. I don't even think I have one that comes close to that. I was like, think of one, but like, I'm not gonna bother. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's more of a cops fucking with people story than it is a weed story,
but it does involve weed, so like that's totally like par for the course, and like, you know, cops are just like they're unfortunately part of the whole thing, but like, oh man, that's fucking awesome. Damn. Well, beyond all that, have you been listening to anything else? We touched on a few albums here and there that have come out recently.
Yeah. I'll try to keep it to like new stuff, new hotness.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. New Evil is really good. I don't know if you've ever heard Evil.
I have not.
Like a UK thrash metal band. They haven't done a record in a while. They used to sound like early Master of Puppets era Metallica, but this new one that came out is a little bit more brutal in a good way. So it's a little bit different. Actually, it kind of reminds me kind of the Haunted a little bit. But yeah, New Evil is pretty ripping. I don't know where you sit with this band. I know they're pretty polarizing. Some people love them, and some people think they're an absolute like stain on the history of metal. But
311,
the new Ghost album, I think is fantastic.
I did like it. I mean, like, I enjoy all the Ghost albums. Like, I'm definitely a fan, I would say. I definitely prefer the earlier stuff to the later stuff, but I certainly enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just a fanboy for that band. I love all their stuff. So yeah, I've been jamming that a lot. There's this band from Oakland called Glowing Brain. This sort of does this like D-beat, dirty punk rock stuff that's super killer. They put out a record, I think in October last year. It's my favorite record of the year last year. Shit, what else? Jess Band, who I do the podcast with, they just released his band Get the Yankee just released an album. It's fantastic. It's pretty heavy, like metal punk stuff. Do you ever hear Jeff's old band Blood Hag?
No, that's a good name for a band.
It is. Reminds me a lot of Blood Hag in a really good way.
Check out both of them.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'll tell you what. I'm not going to tell you anything about Blood Hag. You just go look it up.
Okay.
They're a trip. They're legends.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. You sold. Let's see. What have I been enjoying? Previous guest, Lost Tribes of the Moon. I liked their album. It's all based on like Books of Blood by Clive Barker.
Killer.
It's all cool shit. So that was pretty cool. Like very like weird, some long form like prog stuff and like trad metal and whatnot. So Satanic Royalty, Neighbors, Isme, their new album was pretty damn good.
Oh yeah, it's so good. Oh dude, have you heard the Dark Meditation record he did?
Yeah, it's fucking killer.
Oh, fuck, that's my shit, man. That sort of like late 80s like transition from like hair metal into like heavy rock metal, but still kind of glammy, but also like now we're evil. Now it's evil.
Yeah.
Like the early like Danzig 1 record, like oh my god, that shit's so good. They do it so well.
Oh yeah, dude, they nailed it. Like I was not sure like where they were gonna go with it. I was like, damn, this is really good. So like I've been really enjoying the trad metal trend that's been like coming around, and there's like a bunch of bands like that here in New York, like Shadowland and Tower, that fucking whip ass at doing that kind of stuff.
Sweet.
What else?
The new Author and Punisher is fucking awesome. I don't know.
I've talked to not a lot, but like I've definitely talked to quite a few people so far on here that are like, that's definitely going to be up there, I think, for a lot of people in terms of like really total banger of an album for the year. This band Convent, they put out a record a few years ago, but they put out another one called Call Down the Sun, and it's all women in the band, and it's fucking heavy as hell, and it
killer. Nice.
So strongly recommend that one. And then
I gotta plug my brother-in-law's new band. It's this band from Seattle that just got started, that my brother-in-law started. They're called Nurser. You can find them on Bandcamp. They only have like their first CD out, but it's fucking brutal death grind. It is really good, like fast, heavy, harsh, abrasive metal. Nurser,
good name. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, they're killer.
Awesome. I'd be remiss to say if I didn't mention going to see Morgul Blade from Philadelphia, which is sort of like a trad metal band. Saw them with the aforementioned Shadowland and Massachusetts. I think they're from Massachusetts. Let me just make sure that don't want to say anything wrong.
Want those listeners to correct you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fucking Worcester too. Worcester, Massachusetts band High Command. Fucking what a gross, disgusting show that was at St. Vitus, but had a really fucking good time. So got to take some really cool pictures there. So that was fucking, I could not believe how many shows I went to in March. It's kind of like unreal. And I guess, gotta take it while I can, who knows what's gonna happen.
I know. You gotta, I've only been to 2 shows since sort of like the risk levels have sort of like died down a little bit, but my household has been a little bit more careful than the average person. So I'm not going to be going to shows every weekend or anything. I'd like to. I think Horrors are coming through soon, so I'm going to try and go to that.
I've never checked that band out, or if I have, I haven't given them enough time. So
yeah, they're good.
Add them in there.
Yeah, they're good. I think they're one of my favorite bands playing right now. They're pretty awesome. It's just very very simple riffs that are just like so tasty. As a person who also plays guitars, and I'm always on the quest for like those really, really simple riffs that sound so familiar but are still original somehow. In my opinion, I prefer that over like super technical stuff. Just like a good hook. Horrors are kind of like masters at just finding those really, really basic, simple, bluesy riffs that sort of bounce and swing, but then they just like put so many fucking pedals on it. It just sounds like a wall of noise. It's so good. They're good. They're great. Check them out.
I will. So just like a 0 response on Dream Theater's Grammy win then.
Congrats, I guess.
I used to be so into them, and like if that had happened like several years ago, I would have been like, yeah, but I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I do love technical proggy stuff. I do, but if I'm just doing the dishes, usually not going to put on something super technical.
No, if you're doing the dishes, you need something like a little bit more mundane than that.
I tap my toes. I like to tap my toes.
Is there anything you want to plug and where people can find out about Nuclear Dudes and whatnot?
Yeah. Nuclear Dudes is a recording only project at the moment. So all we have is just a Bandcamp page. You just go to the URL nucleardudes.com. The first EP is up there. It's 8 songs of synth metal bullshit. And then I play guitar and sing in Sandrider. You go to sandrider.bandcamp.com. Yeah, we've got 3 albums under our belt. 4th one coming up soon. Doing stuff with Satanic Royalty. It's been great. Excited for the new album. And then I'm a co-host of a podcast which is all about the fucking wild shit that musicians go through to play shows on tour. It's called Tomorrow We Die. We're on all the major podcast stuff. You can check that out. Yeah, our last interview was with Red Fang, and we've got a couple recorded on their way to the editor right now, and working on more guests. So we're about to launch a bunch. Like pretty stoked for the next couple interviews. They're pretty good.
Consider myself a fan. I really, really fucking dig it, and I'm excited to be revisiting it, and I'm excited that there's new stuff coming out.
Cool.
This is very much my shit. Like I love to hear about the nitty gritty. I mean, there's some dicey shit that comes up in there. I mean, it's like, yikes. It is not. I think one of the beauties of it is that, like, yeah, you definitely have a good time, like, talking about the stories and laughing about them, but you don't put up any kind of airs of like that this is, a simple, easy thing. Like, not all the stuff that happens is like, sure, it's like kind of fun to talk about now, but in the moment, I'm sure it sucked for a lot of these bands.
Yeah. You should, I don't know have you listened to the first episode?
Yes.
With Lupe. Oh my God. That one is it's still one of the craziest ones we've ever had. Partly because Lupe is wonderful and a great storyteller. But yeah, man, some of the shit she went through is just like, it blows my mind. I can't believe it. It's like,
I think the one that really like stuck with me was with Lisa Mungo when I believe the quote for the episode is, "We don't have any food, we have crime."
Yeah, they're in Albuquerque, and she just gets chased by a meth head in this like long, drawn out. It's just like shit out of a horror movie. I don't want to spoil it. Like, people should go listen to it if they're interested. But basically, they're on tour. Someone's getting tattooed. She's bored. I'm gonna go walk down the street and find something to do. A shirtless, huge meth addict freaks out and starts chasing her. She runs into the van as the guy is trying to grab the door and pull it open. She closes it and locks it. The guy disappears. She starts the van. He pops up in front of the hood. She's driving away as this guy is climbing out of the van.
It's horrifying.
She just wanted to go get a sandwich at the store. It's so awesome.
I would like to go get a sandwich. Meth head. Yeah,
it's insane. And it's just that's the shit that happens. I guess that would happen to somebody not on tour too, but it's a story, tour story. That's what we do.
But yeah, definitely go check out Tomorrow We Die. It's great, and looking forward to hearing that and more Nuclear Dudes. And it's fun to check out something new and different on here once in a while. Throw curveball at people.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming back on the show, John. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, anytime. This was awesome. Thank you.
That'll do it for this chapter of the diary.